Welcome back. I have been having so much fun planning, preparing for, and recording these stories to share with you all. If you're new to the vlog, basically the way that this has kind of transformed is that I started the school year making videos for my students to provide them additional content to the curriculum that I've been teaching them in class. Over the course of the year, I cover what I call the 5 pillars of health, which are relationships, mindset, sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And during class, I'll often share a story, and we call that story time with Mr. D. And since we've been home with this pandemic, we have been lacking some story time, so I wanted to share that with you all via these YouTube videos, and I want to share them with people beyond just my students at this point, because I've just been having so much fun sharing them. So keep the positive comments coming, and thanks so much for your positive feedback. Today's story is based on a relationship-focused story, and I'll let you kind of make that link as you continue to watch it. And it starts when I was 12 years old. I was climbing this tree and ascending this giant pine tree that was in my backyard as fast as I possibly could. I lived in suburban Massachusetts in a city called Holyoke, and my house had this giant patch of pine trees in the backyard, and I used to often climb them for whatever reason. And one day I was ferociously climbing up this tree, and I was trying to get up as high as I possibly could so nobody would see me. And as I was climbing up, these spring, what we call New England spring winds, which are really powerful, gusty winds, started to kick up, and the tree started to sway. And as I'm climbing each branch, I can feel my hands getting stickier and stickier from the sap. And my hands are starting to become covered in sap, but I'm still going up, and I'm still going up. And the tree's starting to sway, and I'm starting to get a little nervous. And as I look out through the pine tree, and there's no obstructed view at this point because all the other leaves off the trees are gone, I'm looking over the top of my house, and what I see, I truly cannot believe. And as I think back on it, I just think at that time, as a 12-year-old, it blew my mind, and it was shocking what I was seeing. So a couple minutes prior to that, I was in my house, and my mom said, "Boys, it's time to get in the car." And I thought to myself, I didn't know we were going anywhere today. So I said, "Mom, where are we going?" She said, "Just get in the car. I'll tell you when we get there." And I started thinking, and I said, "Mom, are we going to the dentist?" And there was this long pause. My mom was in the other room, and I was just waiting for the answer, and I knew it. She goes, "Yes." And for me, at the age of 12, hearing that I was going to the dentist was the worst possible news. Honestly, at that age, I would rather hear that Christmas was canceled, my birthday was canceled, and I had to go to school through the entire summer. Like, that's how intense and scary going to the dentist was for me. So as my brothers, I have 2 brothers. My older brother Dave would have been 15 at the time, and my younger brother Jay would have been 6. As they start to get their coats on, their shoes on, I just bolt out the door. And I run straight across our front yard, across the street, and I hide behind this giant oak tree that's in my neighbor's yard, across the street from where I lived. And at the time, even though I was 12 years old, I probably had the genetic development of like a 3rd or a 4th grader. I was just really small for my developmental age, and I was able to easily hide behind this tree and not be seen. So as I'm hiding behind the tree, I hear my family come out, and I hear my mom yelling, "Peter, don't do this to me, let's go! Peter, come get in the car!" And I can hear my older brother or my younger brother, "Peter, Peter!" And as I poke my head out behind the tree, I noticed that they're all facing in the same direction. And the road that I lived on ran north-south, and they were all facing the northern direction up that side of the road. For some reason, all 3 of them were facing the same direction. And I peeked out behind the tree, and I just absolutely went for it. And I ran. This tree was about 50 yards behind where my family was standing, and I ran behind their backs looking at them, thinking there's no way that I'm going to run this entire distance across my neighbor's yard, across the street, across my front yard, and behind my house without being seen. But as I'm watching them, they never turned around. And as I'm heading down the hill in the backyard of my house, my stomach starts to get really, really uncomfortable, because the anxiety and the fear that came along with the dentist, or that came along with going to the dentist, was just so intense for me. It was the worst news you could possibly tell me, is that I had to go to the dentist. And as I get down and I realize that they don't know where I am now, I start to climb the tree. And as I'm starting to climb the tree, I'm thinking about my previous visit to the dentist's office. And my previous visit to the dentist's office with Dr. C was not a pretty one. Because my biggest fear with the dentist, and there's only one thing at the dentist that I was scared of, it was the toothpaste polish that they put on the little bristle thing that would spin around, and they'd polish my teeth. And even just thinking about it right now, it really makes me gag. And I'd be sitting in the chair, white knuckling it, as uncomfortable as I could possibly be, holding my breath, not breathing, with this like feeling of fear and anxiety in my stomach, and refusing myself to swallow, because if that stuff just touched the back of my throat, I'd gag. So as I'm climbing the tree, I'm thinking about my last visit. And in my last visit, I was so anxious and so nervous, and had my mouth open for so long without swallowing, and being so uncomfortable, that I started to gag. And as I started to gag, I turned, I can still picture it in slow motion, turned and literally threw up right in the hygienist's lap. And so in my next visit, I don't know if I'm more scared of going to the dentist or they're more scared of me, but I know that I threw up an entire meal's worth of food in the lap of the hygienist at Dr. C's office. So I'm climbing this tree, just thinking about how much I hated this toothpaste, because to me, that toothpaste was like the combination of like the worst things in the world. For me, it was like something I absolutely hate still to this day is mayonnaise. So it'd be like taking mayonnaise with like the rocks that you'd find at the bottom of a fish tank, and grinding those rocks up into like a sandy powder, and then combining it with mayonnaise, and then forcing it down my throat. Like that's what it felt like to me. And I'm climbing this tree just thinking, I'm putting my mom in this terrible position, knowing that she's kind of faced with this choice between not being able to take all three of us and trying to figure out what she's going to do, and getting in trouble with my father. Because my father was a businessman. He was an investor. And as my 12-year-old kind of self viewed the world, is I viewed my father's priorities like this. So here's his totem pole of priorities. And as far as people went, I think probably toward the bottom would be people that he doesn't know. And then just above that would probably be like acquaintances of his that he knew a little bit. And then above the acquaintances would be like friends. And then above the friends would be like family. And then above the family would be like God. And then above God would be my dad's clients. Their Dr. C was one of my dad's clients. And I knew that if we didn't go to this appointment, it would have incredibly negative implications for my mom. Because my parents didn't argue a whole lot as I grew up. I don't have a lot of memories of them arguing, but one thing I do know is that as those dentist appointments got closer, my father would always remind my mom, make sure you don't miss that appointment. Make sure you don't miss that appointment. Because if that appointment that had 3 boys booked in it went 0 for 3 and upset Dr. C, and my dad heard about it, oh man, I feel so bad for my mom. So I'm climbing this tree, and my family has no clue where I am, and the wind's starting to pick up, and I never had fear of heights, but I'm so high up because I want to climb all the way to the top, so if my brothers or my mom comes down to the base of the tree, because they knew I climbed it off and looked up, they wouldn't be able to see me. And I'm at the top of the tree, and I look out, and getting back to where I started, I start to see something that I wouldn't have believed. Because there's no way that my mom would have ever left without me. And as I'm having this thought, I see the red Cherokee Jeep drive away from our house and down the road and out of the neighborhood. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, it worked. It actually worked. This is the very first time in my life that running and hiding actually worked. And as the wind picks up and the tree starts swaying, I found myself incredibly scared, although I've never been scared of heights before, but this was the highest I'd ever been up in this tree. And then I realized I don't know if I'm more scared about the fact that I'm way up in this tree and it's swaying, or if that I'm now alone and lonely because my mom left with my brothers. And I'm like, being in these gale force winds with my hands covered in sap and like being lonely still does not compare to having to go to the dentist. So I'm cool with it. So with this empty feeling in my stomach of being lonely, but being happy that I don't have to be at the dentist, I start to climb down the tree. And as I'm getting toward the bottom of the tree, I hear my name being called. Peter! Peter! Peter, are you there? And I look up, and into my next door neighbor's backyard is my 81-year-old next door neighbor, Mrs. Doran, who's this petite little lady, super short and thin, but super powerful of a personality, yet the sweetest, kindest person you'll ever meet. And in my mind, the only thing that Mrs. Doran ever did with her time was bake cookies for the kids in the neighborhood, because I never saw Mrs. Doran without her apron. And there was always these amazing smells of peanut butter and chocolate chip cookies wafting out of her windows. So I see her standing in the backyard with a plate of cookies, and she said, Peter, do you want to come over and have some cookies? Now, normally Mrs. Doran would only allow me to have one, maybe two cookies at the most. And I went up there, and I sat down with Mrs. Doran, and for I don't know how long, I sat there and ate an entire plate of cookies and drank this homemade lemonade that she used to make from scratch. It was amazing. And I'm sitting there on Mrs. Doran's back deck thinking, man, my two brothers are at the dentist right now getting the aquarium rock polish and mayonnaise in the back of their teeth, and I'm sitting here living the life eating cookies and drinking lemonade with my neighbor. It was amazing. And I can honestly say that I couldn't believe that I'd pulled it off. I couldn't believe that it worked. That I put this mom in this position. That I put my mom in this position. She had to make a choice, and she left without me. And I actually don't remember the communication or the consequence I had when my mom got home. But I think she was pretty relaxed about it and didn't really make a big deal out of it. Maybe she didn't want to let me know that I won and didn't want to give me that satisfaction. I'm not quite sure. But I do remember it was about 6 months later. I was hanging out at the house, and my mom threw a big surprise up for us and said, hey, we're going to go out for ice cream. And in the Driscoll household, we rarely went out for ice cream. It wasn't something that we did very often. And when we did, it was a super special treat because we'd always go to Friendly's. And if you grew up in the Northeast, you know Friendly's. And Friendly's not only had the very best vanilla ice cream, but Friendly's was the first place back in the day that allowed you to put gummy bears on your ice cream as a topping. And I would get the vanilla ice cream with the gummy bears and the strawberry syrup with rainbow sprinkles on top, and that was like the best thing in the world for me. It was better than Christmas every day and birthday every day and permanent summer vacation. It was incredible. So we get in the car, and we're driving to Friendly's, and we drive past Friendly's. And I said to my mom, I thought we were going to Friendly's. And she said, oh, we are. And I said, well, we just passed it. She said, well, before we go to Friendly's, we're going to go to the dentist first. So when I told my mom I was going to share this story about escaping from the dentist, her response was, well, Pete, which time are you going to share about? And I do not remember this happening more than once, but apparently in my mom's memory, this did happen more than once, and that I think is an amazing thing.